The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Margaret Davis stood frozen at her coffee maker, her hands trembling as she stared at the text message that had just shattered her world and threatened to destroy the most important relationship in her life, completely unaware that this moment of devastating rejection would ultimately lead to revelations about manipulation, family loyalty, and the incredible power of a mother's love when tested by someone determined to tear apart the bonds that had taken 28 years to build, transforming what should have been joyful wedding preparations into a battlefield where truth would emerge in ways that would surprise everyone involved and prove that some relationships are strong enough to survive even the most calculated attempts at destruction. Hello, my dear friends. I'm Tina, and I need you to sit down with me today, because the story I'm about to share will take you on an emotional journey through family loyalty, manipulation, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and son that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about wedding drama and family dynamics. Margaret's experience reveals something profound about how some people will use the most sacred moments in our lives to try to control and manipulate the relationships we hold most dear. And if you've ever felt like someone was trying to push you out of your own family or turn your loved ones against you, this story will resonate deep in your heart and remind you that love and truth have a way of winning even when the odds seem impossible. I promise you'll want to hear every single detail of how one mother's quiet strength and unwavering love changed everything in ways no one saw coming. So please hit that like button to let me know you're here with me on this journey, and consider becoming part of our family by subscribing, because I bring you real stories about real families facing life's most challenging moments with courage and grace. Trust me, what Margaret discovers about her future daughter-in-law will leave you absolutely speechless, and the way her son responds will restore your faith in family bonds that refuse to be broken. Margaret had been a single mother since her son Daniel was 3 years old, working double shifts as a pediatric nurse to provide for them both while building a relationship that was based on mutual respect, open communication, and unconditional love that had weathered every storm life had thrown their way. As a 49-year-old woman who had sacrificed her own romantic relationships to focus on raising her son, Margaret had poured her heart into creating a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of security that comes from knowing someone will always be there for you no matter what challenges arise. The small apartment they had shared for 15 years was decorated with photos documenting every milestone in Daniel's life, from his first steps to his graduation from engineering school, creating a visual timeline of their journey together that reflected the deep bond they had cultivated through years of being each other's primary source of support and encouragement. Daniel's relationship with Christina had begun 2 years earlier when they met at his engineering firm, where she worked as a marketing coordinator, and their courtship had seemed like a fairy tale romance that brought joy and excitement into both their lives while expanding their family circle in ways that initially felt natural and wonderful. Christina was 26 years old, ambitious, and possessed the kind of polished confidence that came from growing up in a wealthy family where appearances and social status were prioritized above almost everything else, creating a background that was dramatically different from the humble but loving environment where Daniel had been raised by his devoted mother. The early months of Daniel and Christina's relationship had been filled with romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and introductions to social circles that exposed Daniel to a lifestyle he had never experienced but found exciting and glamorous in ways that initially seemed to enhance rather than threaten his existing relationships. Margaret had welcomed Christina into their family traditions with open arms, including her in holiday celebrations, birthday dinners, and casual Sunday brunches that had been sacred rituals between mother and son for decades, creating space for a new family member while maintaining the closeness that had always defined their relationship. Christina's behavior during these early family gatherings had been charming and appropriate, with expressions of gratitude for Margaret's cooking, interest in family stories and photo albums, and apparent appreciation for the close relationship between Daniel and his mother that seemed genuine and heartfelt at the time. Margaret had felt hopeful about gaining a daughter-in-law who would add joy and companionship to their small family, while supporting Daniel's happiness and personal growth in ways that complemented rather than competed with the foundation of love and trust they had built together over the years. The engagement announcement had come 6 months earlier during a family dinner at Margaret's apartment, with Daniel presenting a beautiful diamond ring while sharing his excitement about building a future with the woman he loved and wanted to spend his life supporting and cherishing. Margaret's joy had been immediate and genuine, as she embraced both Daniel and Christina while expressing her happiness about the upcoming wedding and her eagerness to help with whatever planning assistance they might need or want from someone who understood Daniel's preferences and family traditions. The wedding planning process had initially included Margaret in discussions about venues, catering, flowers, and other details that seemed to welcome her input and involvement in creating a celebration that would honor both families while reflecting Daniel and Christina's personal style and preferences. Margaret had offered to contribute financially to the wedding expenses, despite her modest nurse's salary, wanting to support her son's happiness and help create the kind of beautiful celebration that would mark the beginning of his married life, with memories that would last forever. Christina's transformation from welcoming future daughter-in-law to controlling manipulator had been so gradual that Margaret initially dismissed the subtle changes as normal wedding stress and the natural adjustments that come with planning a major life event that involves coordinating multiple families and managing countless details while working full-time and maintaining other relationships and responsibilities. The first red flag had appeared during a discussion about the guest list, when Christina had casually mentioned that they were trying to keep the wedding small and intimate, which would unfortunately mean limiting the number of Margaret's friends and extended family members who could be invited to share in Daniel's special day. Margaret had accepted this explanation without protest, understanding that budget constraints and venue limitations often require difficult decisions about guest lists, and she had graciously provided a shortened list of her most important relationships while assuring Christina that she completely understood the need to prioritize immediate family and closest friends. The second concerning incident had occurred during a dress shopping expedition that Christina had organized for the female members of the wedding party, where Margaret had been excluded from the initial planning and only invited at the last minute after Daniel had specifically asked about his mother's involvement in what he assumed would be a fun bonding experience for the women in his life. During the dress shopping trip, Margaret had noticed that Christina's friends and sisters seemed surprised by her presence, as if they had not expected her to be included in the outing, and their conversation had been filled with inside jokes and references to social events and shared experiences that deliberately excluded Margaret from participating in the group dynamic. Christina's behavior during this shopping expedition had been subtly dismissive, with comments about generational differences in fashion preferences and suggestions that Margaret might be more comfortable shopping for mother-of-the-groom attire at different stores that catered to older women with more conservative tastes and limited budgets. The venue selection process had provided another opportunity for Christina to demonstrate her growing disregard for Margaret's feelings and preferences, as she had arranged multiple site visits without informing Daniel's mother, and then presented the final choice as a decision that had already been made based on practical considerations and aesthetic preferences that Margaret wouldn't understand or appreciate. When Margaret had expressed disappointment about being excluded from such an important decision, Christina had responded with apparent concern and apologies, while explaining that she had simply wanted to narrow down the options before involving everyone in the final selection process. Margaret's attempts to contribute to other aspects of the wedding planning had been met with similar patterns of exclusion disguised as consideration, with Christina consistently finding reasons why Margaret's input wasn't needed or appropriate for decisions that would shape Daniel's wedding day experience. The catering menu had been finalized without considering Margaret's knowledge of Daniel's food allergies and preferences. The music selection had ignored the songs that held special meaning for mother and son, and the seating arrangements had placed Margaret at a table with distant relatives rather than in a position of honor that reflected her central role in Daniel's life. The breaking point had come 3 weeks before the wedding, when Christina had requested a private lunch meeting with Margaret to discuss some final details and address any remaining concerns or questions about the upcoming celebration. Margaret had arrived at the upscale restaurant that Christina had chosen, expecting a warm conversation about last-minute preparations, and perhaps an opportunity to bond with her future daughter-in-law before the wedding brought their families together permanently. Instead, she had found herself facing a carefully orchestrated confrontation that would reveal the true nature of Christina's feelings about her relationship with Daniel and her plans for their future together. Christina's demeanor during this lunch meeting had been cold and calculating, completely different from the charming persona she had maintained during family gatherings and wedding planning sessions when Daniel was present to observe their interactions. She had wasted no time in getting to the point of their meeting, explaining that she had been thinking carefully about the wedding guest list and had come to the difficult conclusion that Margaret's presence at the ceremony would create unnecessary drama and complications that could ruin what should be the most perfect day of Christina and Daniel's lives together. The reasoning that Christina had provided for this devastating decision had been a masterpiece of manipulation and emotional warfare, designed to make Margaret feel guilty for existing while painting Christina as the reasonable party who was simply trying to protect everyone from uncomfortable situations and family conflicts. She had claimed that Daniel had expressed concerns about his mother's tendency to become emotional during important family events, and that his stress about managing Margaret's reactions was affecting his ability to enjoy the wedding planning process and look forward to his special day with the joy and excitement that every groom deserved to feel. Christina had continued her calculated attack by suggesting that Margaret's modest background and limited social experience would make her uncomfortable at the elegant wedding that had been planned, and that her presence would create awkward situations for the other guests who came from more sophisticated social circles and might not understand the dynamics of Daniel's family situation. She had framed her request for Margaret to voluntarily absent herself from the wedding as an act of maternal love and sacrifice that would demonstrate Margaret's commitment to Daniel's happiness and her willingness to put his needs above her own desires to participate in what should have been one of the most important days of her life. Hey, beautiful souls, I can feel your hearts breaking for Margaret right now, just like mine did when I first heard this incredible story. There's something so raw and painful about watching a mother's love being weaponized against her by someone who should be welcoming her into the family with open arms. If this story is touching something deep inside your heart, if you're thinking about your own experiences with family manipulation or remembering times when someone tried to make you feel small and unwanted, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You belong here in this community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments, and I want you to know that your story matters just as much as Margaret's. I also need to hear from you in the comments about your own experiences with difficult family dynamics or times when someone underestimated the power of a parent's love. Margaret's response to Christina's devastating ultimatum had been one of stunned silence, as her mind struggled to process the magnitude of what she was being asked to sacrifice and the cruel manipulation that was being disguised as concern for Daniel's well-being and happiness. The restaurant around them had continued buzzing with the conversations and laughter of other diners who were oblivious to the family drama unfolding at their quiet corner table, creating a surreal backdrop for a confrontation that would change the trajectory of multiple lives and relationships in ways that neither woman could have anticipated in that moment. The specific details of Christina's demands had been presented with the kind of calculated precision that suggested extensive planning and preparation, as she had outlined exactly how Margaret's absence from the wedding would be explained to Daniel and other family members who might question why the groom's mother was not present for such an important occasion. Christina had proposed telling everyone that Margaret had developed a sudden illness that prevented her from traveling, or that she had graciously decided to stay home to care for an elderly relative who needed assistance, creating plausible explanations that would protect Christina from appearing to be the villain, while ensuring that Margaret's absence wouldn't generate the kind of questions or sympathy that might expose the truth about what had really happened. Margaret's initial instinct had been to refuse immediately and demand that Christina explain her reasoning to Daniel directly. But the younger woman had been prepared for this response and had quickly escalated her emotional manipulation by claiming that Daniel had already expressed doubts about his mother's ability to handle the social pressures of the wedding without creating embarrassing scenes or uncomfortable moments for the other guests. Christina had painted a picture of Daniel as a man torn between loyalty to his mother and desire for a peaceful wedding day. suggesting that Margaret's insistence on attending would force him to choose between his family relationships in ways that would damage his mental health and create lasting resentment that could destroy their mother-son bond forever. The psychological warfare that Christina had deployed during this conversation had been sophisticated and targeted, designed to exploit Margaret's deepest fears about losing her son's love and respect while making her feel responsible for problems that existed only in Christina's imagination and manipulative storytelling. She had referenced specific moments from family gatherings where Margaret had supposedly embarrassed Daniel or made social mistakes that had caused him stress and discomfort, twisting innocent interactions and normal family dynamics into evidence of dysfunction and inappropriate behavior that needed to be managed and controlled. Margaret's professional experience as a pediatric nurse had taught her to recognize manipulation and emotional abuse in the families she worked with. But finding herself as the target of such calculated cruelty had created a disorienting experience that made it difficult to trust her own perceptions and respond with the clarity and strength that the situation required. The intimate setting of the restaurant lunch had made confrontation feel impossible, while Christina's calm and reasonable tone had created cognitive dissonance that made Margaret question whether she was overreacting to what was being presented as a reasonable request from a concerned bride who simply wanted her wedding day to be perfect. The financial implications of Christina's demands had added another layer of complexity to the situation, as Margaret had already invested significant portions of her modest savings into wedding-related expenses, including her mother-of-the-groom dress, travel arrangements, and contributions to various wedding costs that Daniel and Christina had accepted graciously while apparently planning to exclude her from the actual celebration. The realization that she had been funding her own exclusion from her son's wedding had created a level of betrayal and humiliation that went beyond the emotional pain of being unwanted and unwelcome at such an important family milestone. Christina's manipulation had extended to specific threats about what would happen if Margaret chose to defy her wishes and attempt to attend the wedding despite being uninvited, including claims that Daniel would be forced to choose between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to his bride, creating a scenario where Margaret's presence would be blamed for any conflict or drama that might arise during the celebration. She had painted a picture of Daniel being torn between competing loyalties, suggesting that Margaret's insistence on participating in the wedding would be an act of selfishness that prioritized her own desires over her son's happiness and peace of mind. The timeline for Margaret's decision had been deliberately short, with Christina explaining that the final guest count needed to be submitted to the venue and caterers within the next few days, creating pressure that was designed to prevent Margaret from having time to process the situation fully or seek advice and support from other family members or friends who might help her recognize the manipulation and develop strategies for responding effectively. The artificial urgency had been another calculated element of Christina's campaign to isolate Margaret and force her into making a decision based on fear and confusion rather than careful consideration of her options and rights as Daniel's mother. Margaret's love for her son had made Christina's threats particularly effective, as the suggestion that her presence at the wedding would somehow harm Daniel or create lasting damage to their relationship had triggered every protective instinct that had guided her parenting for nearly 3 decades. The possibility that Daniel might truly prefer her absence from his wedding day had been almost too painful to consider, creating emotional turmoil that made it difficult to distinguish between legitimate concerns and manipulative distortions of reality designed to serve Christina's agenda rather than anyone's genuine well-being. The isolation that Margaret had felt during this confrontation had been profound, as she realized that she had no allies or support systems in place to help her navigate this unprecedented family crisis, and that any attempt to discuss the situation with Daniel would be filtered through Christina's narrative and potentially used as evidence of the very kind of dramatic behavior that was supposedly justifying her exclusion from the wedding. The careful way that Christina had constructed her manipulation had left Margaret feeling trapped and powerless, uncertain about her options, and afraid that any action she took might make the situation worse rather than better. The days following Margaret's devastating lunch meeting with Christina had passed in a blur of sleepless nights and emotional turmoil as she struggled to make sense of the impossible situation that had been thrust upon her and tried to determine the best course of action. For protecting both her relationship with Daniel and her own dignity and self-respect, the small apartment that had always been her sanctuary now felt like a prison where she was trapped with her own thoughts and fears, unable to escape the constant replaying of Christina's words and the growing uncertainty about whether her son truly wanted her absent from his wedding day or if she was being manipulated by someone who had identified her greatest vulnerability and was exploiting it ruthlessly. Margaret's professional training had taught her to document concerning situations and seek objective perspectives when dealing with complex family dynamics. But the personal nature of this crisis had made it difficult to apply her clinical skills to her own circumstances while managing the emotional devastation of feeling rejected and unwanted by the family she had devoted her entire adult life to nurturing and supporting. The isolation that Christina had created around this situation had been particularly effective, as Margaret felt unable to discuss her concerns with mutual friends or extended family members who might inadvertently reveal her distress to Daniel before she had decided how to handle the manipulation that was threatening to destroy their relationship. The financial preparations that Margaret had already made for the wedding had become daily reminders of her uncertain status as she looked at the beautiful dress hanging in her closet and the travel reservations that might need to be canceled if Christina's demands were met, creating practical complications that added stress to an already overwhelming emotional situation. The hotel room that she had booked months in advance was located near the wedding venue, chosen specifically so that she could be available to help with any last-minute needs or simply to be close to her son during one of the most important weekends of his life, and the thought of canceling these arrangements felt like accepting defeat in a battle. She didn't fully understand how to fight. Margaret's attempts to analyze Daniel's recent behavior for signs that might confirm or contradict Christina's claims about his supposed concerns had yielded confusing and contradictory evidence that seemed to support multiple interpretations of his feelings and motivations. Their phone conversations had remained warm and affectionate, with Daniel continuing to share details about wedding preparations and expressing excitement about introducing Margaret to Christina's extended family and friends. But she found herself questioning whether his enthusiasm was genuine or if he was simply being polite while privately sharing Christina's desire for her absence from the celebration. The turning point in Margaret's emotional journey had come when she discovered a box of letters and cards that Daniel had written to her over the years, expressing gratitude for her sacrifices and love, while promising that he would always prioritize their relationship and ensure that any future romantic partner would understand and respect the special bond they shared as mother and son. Reading these heartfelt messages had reminded Margaret of the authentic connection they had built through decades of shared experiences and mutual support, helping her recognize that Christina's version of Daniel's feelings was inconsistent with the man she had raised and the values he had always expressed. The revelation that had changed everything had come through an unexpected source, when Margaret's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had mentioned seeing Daniel's car parked outside her apartment building for over an hour the previous afternoon, while Margaret had been at work, suggesting that her son had come to visit but had not followed through with actually coming upstairs to see her. This unusual behavior had prompted Margaret to check her security camera footage, which revealed Daniel sitting in his car outside her building, apparently having lengthy phone conversations that became increasingly animated and distressed as time passed. Margaret's decision to call Daniel directly and ask about his visit had led to a conversation that would expose the full extent of Christina's manipulation, while revealing that her son had been struggling with his own concerns about his fiancé's behavior toward his mother, but had been unsure how to address the situation without creating conflict that might damage his relationship or his upcoming wedding. Daniel's relief at finally being able to discuss his observations and worries had been palpable, as he confessed that Christina's attitude toward Margaret had been bothering him for weeks, but that he had been afraid to confront the issue directly because of the stress it might add to their wedding preparations. The specific incidents that Daniel shared during this conversation had painted a clear picture of Christina's calculated campaign to exclude Margaret from their lives while maintaining plausible deniability about her true motivations and intentions. He had noticed Christina's subtle undermining of his mother's contributions to wedding planning, her dismissive comments about Margaret's background and social status, and her increasing insistence that their future marriage would require boundaries and distance from extended family relationships that might interfere with their couple dynamic and personal goals. You know what, my dear friends? This is exactly why I'm so passionate about sharing these stories with all of you incredible souls who make up our growing family here. There's something absolutely beautiful about witnessing the moment when truth breaks through deception and manipulation, when love proves stronger than fear and control. If this story is making you think about your own family relationships or times when you've had to fight for what matters most, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and become part of this amazing community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments. I want to hear from you in the comments about your own experiences with family drama, or times when someone tried to come between you and people you love. What other family stories would you like me to share? Your suggestions and engagement help me create content that truly matters to all of us. And trust me, Daniel's response to discovering Christina's manipulation will absolutely restore your faith in the power of family bonds that refuse to be broken by anyone's selfish agenda. Daniel's confession about his growing concerns regarding Christina's treatment of his mother had opened a floodgate of observations and incidents that he had been trying to rationalize or ignore in order to maintain peace during their engagement and wedding planning period, but which now formed a clear pattern of deliberate exclusion and manipulation that he could no longer deny or excuse as misunderstandings or personality conflicts between two important women in his life. The relief in his voice as he finally had permission to share his worries had been unmistakable, revealing the emotional burden he had been carrying while trying to balance his loyalty to his mother with his commitment to his fiancée without fully understanding the calculated nature of the conflict that Christina had been orchestrating behind the scenes. The most disturbing revelation that emerged during Daniel's conversation with his mother had been his description of private conversations where Christina had made increasingly negative comments about Margaret's involvement in their relationship, suggesting that his close bond with his mother was unhealthy and inappropriate for a man who was about to be married and should be prioritizing his wife's feelings and preferences above all other family relationships. Christina had apparently been working systematically to plant seeds of doubt about Margaret's motivations and behavior while positioning herself as the reasonable party who simply wanted a normal marriage without excessive interference from extended family members who might create complications or conflicts. Daniel's growing awareness of Christina's manipulation tactics had been triggered by her recent insistence that they should consider moving to a different city after their wedding, ostensibly for better career opportunities, but with the underlying implication that distance from Margaret would be beneficial for their marriage and personal growth as a couple. This suggestion had felt wrong to Daniel on multiple levels, as his job was going well and he had no desire to leave the community where he had built professional relationships and personal connections. But Christina's presentation of the idea had made him feel guilty for prioritizing his own preferences over what she claimed would be best for their future together. The revelation about Christina's lunch meeting with Margaret had come as a complete shock to Daniel, who had no knowledge of this confrontation and was horrified to learn about the manipulative demands that had been made without his consent or involvement, creating a situation where his mother was being asked to sacrifice her participation in his wedding based on false claims about his feelings and preferences. His immediate response had been anger and disbelief that Christina would take such drastic action without discussing the situation with him, especially since her claims about his concerns regarding his mother's behavior were completely fabricated and designed to serve her own agenda rather than address any legitimate issues. Daniel's decision to confront Christina directly about her unauthorized meeting with his mother had been motivated by a combination of protective instincts toward Margaret and growing clarity about the manipulative patterns that had been affecting their relationship for months without his full awareness or understanding. The conversation that followed had revealed the true extent of Christina's feelings about his family relationships and her plans for controlling their marriage in ways that would gradually isolate him from the support systems and connections that had been central to his identity and emotional well-being throughout his adult life. Christina's response to being confronted about her manipulation had been a masterclass in deflection and victim blaming, as she immediately shifted from denial to claims that she had been trying to protect everyone involved from uncomfortable situations and family drama that would ruin their wedding day and create lasting resentment between different family members. Her ability to reframe her calculated cruelty as caring concern had been sophisticated and practiced, suggesting that this type of manipulation was a fundamental part of her personality, rather than an isolated incident triggered by wedding stress or temporary relationship conflicts. The escalation of Christina's manipulation when she realized that Daniel was not accepting her explanations had revealed the controlling and vindictive nature that she had been carefully concealing throughout their relationship, as she began making threats about calling off the wedding if Daniel insisted on prioritizing his mother's feelings over her legitimate concerns about family dynamics and boundary setting. Her ultimatum had been designed to force Daniel into choosing between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to his fiancée, creating artificial pressure that was intended to make him feel responsible for any relationship damage that might result from his decision. Daniel's clarity about his priorities and values had emerged quickly once he understood the full scope of Christina's manipulation and the false choice that she was trying to force him to make between his family relationships and his romantic partnership, as he realized that a healthy marriage should enhance rather than threaten his existing connections with people who had supported and loved him throughout his life. The revelation that Christina viewed his close relationship with his mother as competition rather than a positive aspect of his character had been particularly troubling, as it suggested fundamental incompatibilities in their values and expectations for marriage that went far beyond wedding planning disagreements or temporary stress. The documentation of Christina's manipulative behavior had become important as Daniel recognized that their relationship problems were not isolated incidents, but part of a systematic pattern of control and emotional manipulation that would likely escalate after marriage if not addressed directly and decisively in the present moment. His decision to involve neutral third parties in their discussions had been motivated by Christina's demonstrated ability to distort reality and manipulate conversations in ways that made it difficult to maintain clarity about what was actually happening versus what she claimed was happening. Margaret's role in helping Daniel recognize the manipulation he had been experiencing had been crucial, as her professional background in healthcare had provided her with the knowledge and vocabulary needed to identify emotional abuse tactics and explain their psychological impact in ways that helped him understand that his discomfort and confusion about Christina's behavior had been valid responses to genuine problems rather than oversensitivity or disloyalty on his part. The confrontation between Daniel and Christina had taken place in their shared apartment 3 days before the scheduled wedding date, creating a timeline that would require immediate decisions about whether to proceed with the celebration or postpone the entire event while they addressed the fundamental relationship issues that had been exposed through Christina's campaign against his mother and her systematic attempts to control and manipulate their family dynamics. The conversation had begun with Daniel's direct questions about the lunch meeting with Margaret, but had quickly expanded to address broader patterns of behavior that he was now able to recognize as problematic and concerning rather than normal relationship adjustments or wedding planning stress. Christina's initial response to Daniel's confrontation had been a combination of defensive anger and continued manipulation, as she accused him of choosing his mother over his fiancée, and claimed that his inability to set appropriate boundaries with Margaret proved that he was not ready for marriage or capable of prioritizing his wife's needs and feelings above other family relationships. Her emotional escalation during this conversation had revealed the controlling personality that she had been carefully concealing throughout their courtship, as she demanded that Daniel prove his commitment to their relationship by supporting her decision to exclude Margaret from the wedding, regardless of his own feelings or preferences about the situation. The revelation that Christina had been systematically undermining Daniel's relationship with his mother for months had become clear as he began connecting various incidents and conversations that had seemed innocent or well-intentioned at the time, but now formed a clear pattern of manipulation designed to isolate him from his primary support system and create dependency on Christina for emotional validation and decision-making guidance. Her subtle criticisms of Margaret's parenting style, financial status, and social background had been carefully crafted to plant seeds of doubt and embarrassment while maintaining plausible deniability about her true motivations and intentions. Daniel's growing awareness of how Christina's manipulation had affected his own behavior and perceptions had been particularly disturbing, as he realized that he had begun to see his mother through Christina's critical lens rather than trusting his own decades of positive experiences and emotional connection with the woman who had sacrificed everything to provide him with love, stability, and opportunities for success. The recognition that he had been gradually trained to question his own judgment and prioritize Christina's opinions over his own instincts had been a wake-up call about the psychological impact of sustained emotional manipulation and the importance of maintaining independent relationships and perspectives. The ultimatum that Christina had presented during their confrontation had been designed to force an immediate decision about their wedding and future relationship, as she claimed that Daniel's support for his mother's attendance at their wedding would prove that he was not ready for marriage, and that she could not trust him to prioritize their partnership over other family relationships that might create ongoing conflicts and complications. Her insistence that healthy marriages required complete loyalty to one's spouse above all other relationships had revealed fundamental misunderstandings about family dynamics and emotional maturity that suggested deeper compatibility issues beyond the immediate wedding crisis. Daniel's response to Christina's ultimatum had been swift and decisive, as he realized that her demand for him to choose between his mother and his fiancée was itself evidence of the controlling and manipulative tendencies that would make their marriage unsustainable and unhealthy for everyone involved, including any future children who might be subjected to similar isolation tactics and emotional manipulation designed to serve Christina's need for control rather than the family's overall well-being and happiness. His clarity about the situation had been remarkable, considering the emotional pressure and timeline constraints that Christina had created to prevent careful consideration of the options and consequences. The practical implications of Daniel's decision to prioritize his relationship with his mother and refuse Christina's manipulative demands had required immediate action regarding the wedding arrangements, vendor contracts, guest notifications, and financial responsibilities that had been accumulating over months of planning and preparation. The short timeline before the scheduled celebration had created logistical challenges that needed to be addressed quickly and sensitively, particularly regarding the guests who had made travel arrangements and the vendors who had been contracted to provide services for the event. Daniel's conversation with Margaret following his confrontation with Christina had been emotional and healing for both of them, as they processed the manipulation that had been affecting their relationship and reaffirmed their commitment to maintaining the close bond that had sustained them both through decades of challenges and changes. Margaret's response to learning about Daniel's decision had been one of relief and gratitude, but also concern about the emotional and practical consequences that he would face as a result of standing up to Christina's manipulation and choosing family loyalty over romantic pressure. The support system that rallied around Daniel during this crisis had included extended family members, friends, and colleagues who had witnessed Christina's behavior during the engagement period and had their own concerns about her treatment of Margaret and her apparent attempts to control and manipulate various aspects of Daniel's life and relationships. Their validation of his decision and offering of practical assistance had helped him recognize that his concerns about Christina's behavior had been shared by others who cared about his well-being and had been observing the relationship dynamics with growing worry and confusion. Margaret's professional perspective on the situation had been invaluable in helping Daniel understand the psychological tactics that Christina had been using and the potential long-term consequences of remaining in a relationship characterized by manipulation, control, and deliberate isolation from family support systems that provided emotional stability and independent validation of his worth and judgment. Her ability to explain the patterns of emotional abuse in clinical terms had helped Daniel recognize that his experience was not unique and that recovery from this type of manipulation would require time, support, and commitment to rebuilding his confidence in his own perceptions and decision-making abilities. The decision to cancel the wedding had required Daniel to navigate a complex web of social, financial, and emotional consequences that tested his resolve and commitment to prioritizing his values and family relationships over the expectations and pressures created by Christina's manipulation and the investment that both families had made in the upcoming celebration. The phone calls to family members and close friends had been difficult but ultimately liberating, as Daniel found himself able to speak honestly about the relationship problems that had been developing beneath the surface of what appeared to be a happy engagement and successful wedding planning process that was moving toward a joyful celebration. The reactions from Christina's family had been varied and revealing, with some members expressing concern about the sudden cancellation, while others seemed relieved or unsurprised by the turn of events, suggesting that Christina's manipulative tendencies had been observed or experienced by other family members who had been reluctant to interfere in what appeared to be a successful romantic relationship. The conversations with Christina's parents had been particularly illuminating, as they shared their own observations about their daughter's need for control and her historical pattern of creating conflicts with the families of her romantic partners in ways that isolated her boyfriends from their existing support systems. Margaret's role in helping Daniel navigate the practical aspects of the wedding cancellation had been crucial, as her organizational skills and emotional support provided stability during a period of intense stress and upheaval that required numerous decisions and communications with vendors, venues, and guests who needed to be notified about the change in plans. Her ability to handle many of the logistical details allowed Daniel to focus on processing the emotional aspects of ending his engagement and recovering from the manipulation that had been affecting his judgment and decision-making for months without his full awareness. The financial implications of canceling the wedding had been significant but manageable, as most vendors had cancellation policies that provided partial refunds for events canceled within a certain time frame. And the family members who had contributed to wedding expenses expressed understanding about the circumstances and relief that Daniel had recognized the problems before making a permanent commitment to someone whose values and behavior were incompatible with healthy family relationships. The money that was lost in cancellation fees and non-refundable deposits was viewed as a worthwhile investment in Daniel's long-term happiness and well-being rather than a regrettable financial setback. Christina's response to the wedding cancellation had been predictably dramatic and manipulative, as she alternated between tearful apologies and angry accusations while trying to convince Daniel that their relationship problems could be resolved through couples counseling or compromise solutions that would allow them to marry while addressing his concerns about her treatment of his mother. Her inability to understand or acknowledge the fundamental nature of the manipulation she had employed suggested that the controlling behavior was deeply ingrained rather than a temporary response to wedding stress or relationship anxiety. The revelation that Christina had been planning similar isolation tactics regarding Daniel's friendships and professional relationships had emerged through conversations with mutual acquaintances who shared their own observations about her subtle attempts to undermine his connections with colleagues and longtime friends who might provide alternative perspectives or emotional support that could interfere with her control over his decision-making and life choices. The systematic nature of her manipulation had become increasingly clear as more people came forward with examples of concerning behavior that they had witnessed, but had been reluctant to address directly until Daniel began asking specific questions about their observations and experiences. The healing process for both Daniel and Margaret had begun immediately following the wedding cancellation, as they worked together to process the emotional impact of the manipulation they had both experienced and to rebuild their confidence in their own perceptions and judgment after months of having their reality systematically distorted by someone who had appeared to care about their well-being while actually working to undermine their relationship. Margaret's professional background in healthcare had been invaluable in helping them both understand the psychological tactics that had been employed and the normal recovery process that follows exposure to sustained emotional manipulation and gaslighting. The support network that emerged around Daniel and Margaret during this crisis had been remarkable in its scope and enthusiasm, as extended family members, friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances rallied to provide emotional support, practical assistance, and validation for the difficult decision to prioritize family relationships over romantic pressure and social expectations about following through with wedding commitments regardless of the underlying relationship problems that might make marriage inadvisable or unhealthy. The outpouring of support had helped both mother and son realize that their concerns about Christina's behavior had been shared by many people who cared about their well-being, but had been uncertain about how to express their worries without seeming intrusive or judgmental about a relationship that appeared successful on the surface. Margaret's reflection on the manipulation she had experienced had led to important insights about the warning signs of emotional abuse and the sophisticated tactics that manipulative individuals use to isolate their targets from support systems while maintaining plausible deniability about their true motivations and intentions. Her ability to recognize these patterns in her own experience had been enhanced by her professional training, but she realized that many people might not have the knowledge or resources needed to identify manipulation when it was happening to them, particularly when it was disguised as concern or presented as reasonable boundary setting between family members. Daniel's process of recovering from the psychological impact of Christina's manipulation had included therapy sessions focused on rebuilding his confidence in his own judgment and learning to recognize the subtle signs of emotional manipulation that might help him avoid similar situations in future relationships. The therapeutic work had been challenging but ultimately empowering, as he developed a clearer understanding of his own values and boundaries, while learning communication skills that would help him maintain healthy relationships based on mutual respect and genuine support rather than control and manipulation disguised as love or concern. The professional consequences for Christina had been minimal but symbolically important, as her behavior toward Daniel's family had become known within their shared social and professional circles, creating a reputation for relationship drama and manipulative tendencies that would likely affect her future romantic prospects and social standing within the community where she had been working to establish herself as a successful and desirable partner. The informal network of communication within their industry had ensured that her controlling behavior and systematic manipulation would be remembered and discussed by people who might encounter her in dating or professional contexts. Margaret's decision to share her experience with other parents and families had led to speaking opportunities and support group facilitation that allowed her to transform her painful experience into a source of education and empowerment for others who might be facing similar challenges with manipulative future in-laws or family members who were trying to control or damage important relationships. Her presentations had been well received and had helped other families recognize warning signs and develop strategies for protecting their relationships from manipulation and emotional abuse. The legal consultation that Daniel had pursued regarding the financial losses associated with the wedding cancellation had revealed that some of Christina's behavior might have constituted fraud or intentional infliction of emotional distress, particularly her deliberate deception about Daniel's feelings and preferences when demanding that Margaret exclude herself from the wedding. While Daniel had chosen not to pursue legal action, the consultation had provided validation that Christina's behavior had crossed ethical and potentially legal boundaries rather than representing normal relationship conflicts or wedding planning disagreements. Daniel's dating life following his broken engagement had been approached with increased awareness and caution as he applied the lessons learned from his experience with Christina to recognize healthy relationship dynamics and identify potential red flags that might indicate controlling or manipulative tendencies in future romantic partners. His enhanced understanding of emotional manipulation tactics had made him a more discerning and confident partner who was better equipped to maintain his independence and family relationships while building romantic connections based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect. The anniversary of the canceled wedding had become an annual celebration for Daniel and Margaret, as they marked the date when truth and family loyalty had triumphed over manipulation and control, creating a positive tradition that honored their relationship and commemorated Daniel's courage in choosing authentic connections over social pressure and romantic manipulation. The celebration had evolved to include other family members and friends who had supported them during the crisis, creating a community gathering that reinforced the values of honesty, loyalty, and mutual support that had guided their decision-making during the most challenging period of their relationship. Margaret's professional development had been enhanced by her personal experience with manipulation and emotional abuse, as she had pursued additional training in recognizing and responding to family dynamics that might affect her pediatric patients and their caregivers. Her enhanced skills in identifying manipulation and providing support for families dealing with relationship conflicts had made her more effective in her healthcare role, while also providing personal satisfaction and meaning that transformed her traumatic experience into a source of professional growth and community service. The relationship between Daniel and Margaret had emerged from the crisis stronger and more honest than ever before, with improved communication skills and a deeper appreciation for the trust and loyalty that had sustained them through decades of challenges and changes. Their experience with Christina's manipulation had taught them both the importance of discussing concerns openly rather than allowing doubts or confusion to fester. And they had developed new traditions and rituals that reinforced their commitment to maintaining transparent and supportive communication about all aspects of their lives and relationships. Daniel's eventual marriage to a woman who celebrated rather than threatened his close relationship with his mother had provided a beautiful contrast to his experience with Christina, demonstrating the difference between healthy partnership that enhances existing relationships and manipulative control that seeks to isolate and dominate. His wife Sarah had embraced Margaret as a beloved family member from their first meeting, creating the kind of expanded family dynamic that enriched everyone's life rather than creating competition or conflict between different relationships and loyalties. The wedding celebration that Daniel and Sarah had planned 3 years after the canceled engagement with Christina had been a joyful affirmation of healthy family relationships and authentic love, with Margaret playing a central role in the planning process and celebration as both mother of the groom and beloved family member whose wisdom and support were valued and respected by both the bride and groom. The contrast between this celebration and the anxiety and manipulation that had characterized the previous engagement had been striking for everyone involved, demonstrating the difference between relationships built on genuine compatibility and those contaminated by control and emotional manipulation. Sarah's approach to joining Daniel's family had been everything that Christina's had not, characterized by genuine interest in building relationships with his existing support network rather than trying to replace or undermine the connections that had provided him with love and stability throughout his life. Her enthusiasm for family traditions, her respect for Margaret's role in Daniel's life, and her desire to contribute positively to their family dynamic had created an atmosphere of inclusion and growth rather than competition and division that made everyone feel valued and appreciated. Margaret's role as grandmother to Daniel and Sarah's children had provided the ultimate validation of the decision to prioritize family relationships over romantic manipulation, as she was able to be fully present and involved in her grandchildren's lives without having to navigate the hostility and control that Christina would have brought to the family dynamic. The loving relationship between the grandchildren and their grandmother had created beautiful memories and traditions that enriched everyone's experience while providing the children with additional sources of love, wisdom, and support that enhanced their development and happiness. The contrast between the family dynamic that Daniel had created with Sarah and the isolated, controlled environment that Christina had been planning had become increasingly clear over time, as friends and family members observed the difference between relationships built on mutual respect and those characterized by manipulation and power struggles. The children's natural comfort with extended family relationships and their easy affection for their grandmother demonstrated the positive impact of choosing partners who enhance rather than threaten existing family bonds. Daniel's reflection on his experience with Christina had led to insights about the importance of trusting one's instincts and maintaining independence within romantic relationships. Lessons that he had shared with friends and family members who faced their own relationship challenges and decisions about compatibility and long-term partnership potential. His willingness to discuss the manipulation he had experienced had helped other people recognize similar patterns in their own relationships, while providing hope that it was possible to recover from emotional abuse and build healthier connections based on genuine love and respect. Margaret's speaking engagements about family relationships and emotional manipulation had expanded to include presentations for engagement counseling programs, premarital education classes, and family therapy training sessions, where her personal experience combined with her professional background provided valuable insights for couples and families navigating complex relationship dynamics. Her ability to identify warning signs and provide practical guidance for protecting family relationships from manipulation had made her a sought-after consultant and educator in her community and beyond. The ripple effects of Daniel's decision to cancel his wedding with Christina had extended far beyond his immediate family. As friends and colleagues who witnessed his courage in prioritizing authentic relationships over social pressure had been inspired to examine their own relationship choices and make changes that aligned with their values rather than external expectations or manipulative pressure from partners or family members. The example of choosing truth over convenience had created positive changes in multiple families and relationships within their social network. The financial recovery from the canceled wedding had been complete within 2 years, as the money that would have been spent on a celebration of a manipulative relationship was instead invested in experiences and opportunities that strengthened existing family bonds and created positive memories for Daniel and Margaret to share and treasure. The perspective that the lost deposits and cancellation fees had been a worthwhile investment in long-term happiness had proven accurate as Daniel's life developed in directions that would have been impossible if he had remained trapped in Christina's controlling relationship. Christina's attempts to reconnect with Daniel in the years following their broken engagement had been consistent but unsuccessful, as her messages and contact attempts revealed that she had not developed insight into the manipulative behavior that had ended their relationship and continued to blame external factors rather than taking responsibility for the choices and actions that had created the crisis. Daniel's ability to maintain firm boundaries while remaining polite had demonstrated his growth and healing from the manipulation he had experienced. The documentary interest in Daniel and Margaret's story had led to media coverage that helped raise awareness about the subtle forms of emotional manipulation that can occur within seemingly normal romantic relationships. Particularly, the tactics used to isolate partners from their family support systems in ways that create dependency and control rather than healthy interdependence. Their willingness to share their experience publicly had contributed to broader conversations about relationship red flags and the importance of maintaining family connections, even after marriage or long-term partnership. Margaret's mentorship of other mothers who were dealing with manipulative future daughters-in-law or sons-in-law had become an informal but important aspect of her community involvement, as she provided support and guidance for families navigating similar challenges while helping them recognize that they were not alone in facing these difficult dynamics. Her ability to offer both emotional support and practical strategies had helped numerous families protect their relationships from manipulation while maintaining hope for positive resolution. The annual gathering that had developed around the anniversary of Daniel's canceled wedding had grown to include other families who had faced similar challenges, creating a support network and celebration of courage that honored everyone who had chosen authentic relationships over manipulative control. The event had become a powerful reminder of the importance of trusting one's instincts and prioritizing genuine love and respect over social pressure and romantic manipulation. The long-term perspective on Daniel's decision to cancel his wedding with Christina had revealed the profound wisdom of choosing short-term social discomfort over long-term relationship dysfunction, as the years that followed had been filled with genuine happiness, authentic connections, and the kind of family harmony that would have been impossible if he had allowed manipulation and control to determine his life choices. The courage that he had demonstrated in that crucial moment had created a foundation for all his future relationships and decisions, establishing patterns of honesty and integrity that guided his approach to marriage, parenting, and community involvement. Margaret's transformation from a mother facing exclusion from her son's wedding to a respected advocate and educator about family relationships had demonstrated the power of using painful experiences as catalysts for positive change and community service that extended far beyond personal healing and recovery. Her ability to transform trauma into wisdom and isolation into connection had inspired countless other people who faced similar challenges while providing hope that even the most difficult experiences could become sources of strength and purpose. The professional recognition that Margaret had received for her work in family advocacy and emotional abuse education had included speaking opportunities at national conferences, consultation requests from healthcare organizations, and invitations to contribute to professional publications about recognizing and responding to manipulation in family systems. Her unique perspective as both a healthcare professional and someone who had personally experienced sophisticated emotional manipulation had made her voice particularly valuable in educational and therapeutic contexts. Daniel's children had grown up with stories about the importance of trusting their instincts and choosing relationships based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect, rather than external pressure or manipulative tactics designed to create dependency and control. The family culture that he and Sarah had created emphasized open communication, respect for individual autonomy within loving relationships, and the value of maintaining connections with extended family and friends who provided diverse perspectives and emotional support. The contrast between the family dynamics that Christina had been attempting to create and the healthy relationships that Daniel ultimately built had been stark and illuminating for everyone who observed both situations, demonstrating the difference between love that seeks to control and isolate versus love that encourages growth and maintains connections with broader support networks. The children's natural comfort with extended family relationships and their easy affection for multiple generations had shown the positive impact of choosing partners who enhanced rather than threatened existing family bonds. Christina's life trajectory following the canceled engagement had included additional relationship failures, characterized by similar patterns of manipulation and control, suggesting that her behavior toward Daniel and Margaret had been part of a consistent approach to romantic relationships rather than an isolated incident triggered by wedding stress or temporary relationship anxiety. The reports from mutual acquaintances indicated that she had not developed insight into her manipulative tendencies and continued to blame external factors for relationship problems rather than examining her own behavior and its impact on potential partners. The educational initiatives that had emerged from Daniel and Margaret's willingness to share their experience had included workshops for engaged couples about maintaining family relationships after marriage, support groups for parents dealing with manipulative future in-laws, and training programs for wedding vendors and venues about recognizing and responding to family conflicts that might indicate underlying abuse or manipulation. Their story had become a case study in multiple educational and therapeutic contexts where it provided valuable insights about relationship dynamics and recovery processes. Margaret's grandchildren had benefited immeasurably from her presence and involvement in their lives, receiving the kind of intergenerational wisdom and unconditional love that enriched their development, while providing them with additional sources of security and support that enhanced their confidence and emotional resilience. The bedtime stories that Margaret shared often included age-appropriate versions of the importance of trusting one's feelings and choosing relationships with people who treated them with kindness and respect, rather than trying to control or manipulate their choices and connections. The anniversary celebration that had become an annual tradition for Daniel's family had evolved to include community service projects that honored the themes of courage, authenticity, and family loyalty that had guided their decision-making during the crisis with Christina. The volunteer work at domestic violence shelters, family counseling centers, and community education programs had provided meaningful ways to give back while reinforcing the values that had shaped their approach to relationships and family life. Daniel's professional success had been enhanced by the confidence and integrity that he had developed through his experience with Christina's manipulation and his decision to prioritize authentic relationships over social convenience and romantic pressure. His reputation for honesty and loyalty had made him a trusted colleague and leader within his industry, while his ability to recognize and respond appropriately to manipulation had protected him from various professional and personal situations that might have created problems for someone less experienced in identifying these dynamics. The legacy of that canceled wedding had become a story of transformation and empowerment that continued to inspire families facing similar challenges to trust their instincts, seek support, and believe in their ability to create healthy relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than control and manipulation. Margaret and Daniel's example had demonstrated that even the most painful betrayals could become sources of wisdom and strength that created positive change, extending far beyond the original trauma and disappointment. My beautiful friends, thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey of family love, conquering manipulation and control. Margaret and Daniel's story reminds us that sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most beautiful outcomes, and that choosing authenticity over convenience can transform not only our own lives, but also inspire positive change in our entire community. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you of your own experiences with family loyalty and the power of standing up for what's right, please stay connected with our family here by clicking on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now to continue exploring these powerful themes of courage, love, and the amazing strength we find when we choose truth over manipulation.